Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. Wow, it is 10:15 on a Friday, a free flow Friday here on the Prophet's Porch. And we are so very excited to come to you today. Always exciting times to come to the audience that the Lord has so blessed me with, the faithful audience that comes to hear what the prophets are going to say on the Prophet's Porch. We are so delighted that you took taking time out of your busy morning just to hear what the Lord is saying, and just take a few moments just to listen to the prophetic thoughts that the Lord is releasing to His prophets. So we're so happy to be here on today. I have a very special guest today. He is no stranger to the Prophet's Porch. He's a great man of God from Texas, Dallas, Texas, the senior pastor of the Reassess Church in Dallas, Texas, one of our favorite guests. He's a part of the Prophet's Porch family, and we're going to have him to share with us, and we're going to, just flow freely. Look, I'm so excited. I'm getting tongue-tied. We're going to flow freely. Prophets flow better when they can flow freely. Say freely. And so we're going to bring the man of God, again, no stranger to the Prophet's Porch, Apostle Ray Williams. Good morning, Apostle Williams.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. How are you, sir?
So glad that you are with us on today. It is always a delight to have you with us.
And always a delight to be here, man. Absolute joy to be here. Absolutely.
Wow. How are things going in the wonderful state of Texas? What's the climate there?
Well, the prophetic climate or the natural climate?
Whichever way you want to flow.
Well, natural climate, I'm looking out the window here, and it's quite beautiful day. Nice sunshiny day. Of course,
Okay.
In Texas, we're battling COVID at an outrageous proportion, averaging the last couple of days 4,000 and 5,000 new cases.
Wow.
So we're up against a lot here as it relates to COVID, and I'm believing that any moment now the governor's going to. He suggested a shutdown, but I believe what is necessary for us is that a mandatory shelter in place. I call it our shelter in faith. As we shelter in place, we have to flatten the curve. I understand the economic outpour, but I'm a firm believer that dead people don't spend money, and we must put people over profit. So prophetically, I think we're in a very pivotal time. We're in a time where, of course, Texas is a very conservative state, if you would, and conservatives are now coming under fire because we're starting to look like anything but the people of God. We say that we're the party of God. We say that we are about family first, but we're not looking that way now. So prophetically, I think that we are in a bit of a shaking, if you would.
Yeah, I believe that too. We're definitely in a bit of a shaking. There's so much information out there. People are enemies to the media. They say the media hypes things up, and they do sometimes, and so forth. You have a background with the media, and so you know that firsthand that sometimes the media is doing things to hype and not help.
The media is all based on ratings. So whatever produces good ratings, and can sometimes it doesn't have to be accurate. It just has to be sensationalized. The danger of media today is that the focus is not necessarily about information. It's really about misinformation, depending on whatever persuasion your media outlet is from. If it's to the left, and it's to the vantage point of the left. If it's to the right, then it's the vantage point to the right. If it's the alt-right, then of course it's a bit more extreme. And I think in our efforts to be first to report the news or to report the story, it doesn't even matter if we're accurate. It's just about who broke the story first. And unfortunately, that's the swing that we're in.
Yeah, definitely is a swing that we're in. I see it all the time. news media outlets looking to see who can break the story first, not even fact finding and fact checking and verifying information and so forth. And so
Hmm.
that can be a hindrance to, folks that really want to do right and listen to, the medical and scientists, their predictions and their suggestions and so forth. It can kind of be a hindrance, like throwing a wrench, in the works of things of trying to get things to a place where everybody is compliant and so forth. And I just believe that, we're going to see the fruit of who was given the powers that be a spirit of cooperation. It's going to show up. That fruit is going to show up.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. It's going to show up. It's going to manifest in ways that may not paint them in such a favorable light. I think one of the extended dangers of that is that it produces a level of chaos
Right.
that sometimes is not controllable. Um,
Absolutely.
you know, when you stir as a country, as a world now, the world is in a very pivotal place. I believe that a lot of what we're seeing in the news, on the media, is really God bringing us face to face with our own hypocrisy. The Lord spoke to me, he says, I'm bringing America face to face with its own hypocrisy. I'm
Wow.
giving America back what it's given me. And so a lot of what we're beginning to see is the revelation of who we are as a culture, as a country, as a nation, and I believe to some degree, even as a world, we're beginning to see that we have talked about being the people of God, party of God, nation of God, but we've not necessarily been pleasing God with our policies, with our actions, with our behaviors, with how we treat our fellow man, and
Absolutely.
right now I think it's a very pivotal time for the church, because this is the time for the apostolic church. And I don't mean that by denomination, because I don't believe that I just don't endorse a apostolic denomination. I think every church should be apostolic in nature. And so when I say the apostolic church, those who are walking in authority, who walk in revelation, who have authority, who have insight and wisdom, who have an authentic voice and incline authentic ears to God, to be able to lead the charge now. Because if we don't stand up and be counted now, man, I don't know where we'll be. So great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it just goes to, we don't know where we're going to be. And, just a thought that came to mind for me, during this time is
Mhm.
that we can't as leaders and leading in this crisis, apostle, we can no longer, exhaust our energy on things that are no longer authorized.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. If you're pouring into the thing that is not authorized by God, you're causing yourself more damage, and you'll leave with more scars than the Lord intended for you to have. I mean,
Wow.
that's just real talk.
Right.
So often we become emotional, or I was sharing last night with our church that your passion is going to have to not contaminate your promise.
Wow. That's good.
You have to get to a place where your passions are going to have to be controlled. Just because you're passionate about it doesn't mean it's God. Doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad thing, but it does not necessarily mean that it's the thing that God has authorized you to do. And we're going to have to get to a place where our passions are in line with the promise that's on our life. And if it's not, just stop. If it's not, just stop it. If
Yeah.
it's
So, look, just stop. That,
yeah,
it's not even spooky and deep. Just stop. And
no.
again, and going back to, you and I have this conversation all the time.
Mhm.
If it's no longer, sometimes some of us some pastors are going to find out that their church is no longer authorized to be in a building and so forth. So
Yeah.
I want you to, what would you say to a pastor? What would your counsel be to a pastor that's wrestling with, um, the Lord changing the landscape and the framework of their ministry as an apostolic voice? What would be your counsel to one of your sons or daughter that was in that situation?
Well, I think it's imperative, and it's really important to note what your assignment is. Let's start there. Because if your
Right.
assignment was to lead a church brick and mortar, and to formulate a ministry brick and mortar, that assignment didn't change because of COVID. However, COVID could have exposed
Okay.
the fact that you were in a mix match. COVID will
Wow.
also expose the fact that as a leader you're incompetent or incapable, because just because I share with my sons and daughters in the faith, my church didn't close. Our
No.
building has. We've done ministry every day. I mean, I've been preaching
Literally.
literally every day. Yeah, since the second Sunday in March, I have preached, prophesied, prayed, led the church every single day since the second Sunday in March. So if your ministry, if you've not had the fortitude, if you've not been able to muster up the energy to be creative and find creative outlets in which you can stay connected to your church and reach your people, God could be telling you something. He could be
Right.
exposing your lack of leadership. I think what we also have to arrive at is this. God could be calling you to ministry, but is he calling you to start a church?
Right.
There are a lot of people who started churches that God didn't call you to start a church. You may very well be called to ministry, but I think, and I've shared this with you several times, what this pandemic has exposed is how many people should not be pastoring, how many
Wow.
people who are not authentic voices, and how many people who should just not do it. And so,
Or be on voice rest.
yeah, that too. But what I'm noticing is this: is many of them don't need to be on voice rest. They need to go and find their voice.
Wow. Wow.
See, you can only walk in someone else's voice, but for so long. The lie can only stand until the truth shows up. When the truth shows up, the lie no longer has power. And so, in this season,
Wow.
I would say gauge your level of efficacy. How effective are you online? You know, do people, are more people following you? Is your
Right.
ministry being exposed? Have you been able to keep the attention and captivate the attention of the audience that you had? And if not, it may be time for you to
Without
walk.
gimmicks.
Yeah,
Without gimmicks, Apostle.
absolutely. Well, I think anything you do, you should do without gimmicks. Anything you do with the gimmick is just pitiful.
Yeah.
If you need a gimmick to endorse your ministry, you're already in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Wow.
I don't say that to offend people, but I do say that to inform people. If you feel the need to have a gimmick, you're already lost. Because I'm gonna tell you something. People now are listening for the authentic.
Exactly.
The gimmick won't work.
It won't.
They're listening for the real. And the worst thing you could have done in the last season was be a gimmick. And now the people are in the house and they're sequestered and they're quarantined and they're sheltering in faith. And now they've heard something authentic. They're not coming back to you. So
And I'm gonna tell you, desperation makes people become more analytical. When we are sheltering in faith. Yes, we are. But we've had more time to assess things. We have more time to peel back layers, and the real, the authentic, the unfabricated is going to come to the surface.
absolutely. This time, when this all started, the Lord sent a word and he said that he was purifying the platform.
Uh-huh.
He was clearing the clutter,
Mm-hmm.
and he was presenting emerging, authentic, prophetic voices.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe as we navigate this system, as we begin to navigate, and I call it a system because I believe that this whole COVID thing is a system. As we navigate this, I believe he's going to reveal to us, one, our assignment, but from the people's perspective, I think what is beginning to happen as well is people are going to be a bit more introspective, a bit more analytical, and really figure out where in the scheme of things they fit. And if you have been legitimately feeding them or not. I think in this season, substance is going way out. If you have no substance, and what I mean by that is, I watch everybody because I like to
Right.
support preachers, but you can't holler at people for 20 minutes and then think that that's good preaching. People now are going to need some substance. You're going to need an authentic word. You're going to need a
Absolutely.
very sound theological persuasion, but not just that alone. You're also going to need some fresh wind and revelation.
Absolutely.
And the ABCD days of preaching, that's over.
Look, that doesn't work.
That
It,
won't
it, it
work.
does. It doesn't work. It's a whole new. And again, going back to the thought that the Lord gave me: reassess, recover, or rebuild. We're having to reassess a lot of things
Hmm.
I'm talking about, you have a very progressive church. I'm certain that you guys, you guys are on the cutting edge of everything. But I'm saying with regard to systems, the systems that you all have in place
Hmm.
before you go back into the sanctuary, the systems definitely have to be reassessed to make sure that we're keeping the people safe.
Absolutely. I was we were on live a couple days ago, and there's a lady who joined our church. Our church has actually grown since the pandemic. They've joined online, and she said,
Wow.
what's our plan for going back? And I'm going to unveil that a bit Sunday. And so we're setting up sanitation stations. We've ordered masks, gloves, a ton of hand sanitizer. And I have one more system that we're putting in place, whereby we're going to have color coded armbands. We're working on that as we speak. And red will be, I'm willing to engage you, but I want to do that from a distance. In other words, I'm keeping my distance. Yellow would be, I'm open to talk, but not to touch. And then blue would indicate
Wow.
that I'm open for a hug and I don't mind. And so depending on the armband that the person is wearing, it's speaking for their position. That way a person doesn't have to be rude. A person doesn't have to feel committed. But when you walk in, we'll have 3 stations, and you pick your armband, you put it on. Of course, we have masks available, gloves available for our staff, and as much hand sanitizer as we can handle. So everyone who comes through the building will first receive some hand sanitizer. So no matter what they've touched outside the building, when they come in, their hands will be sanitized. And of course, prior to service, we're going to be sanitizing and fogging the entire sanctuary so that people can return safely. And all of that is contingent upon whether or not we're under another shelter in place order. But our return to reset is July 12th, the second Sunday in July. And
Wow.
so
Okay.
those systems are in place, but we also have systems that we're developing now, and we're having to invest in more media equipment because we have gained some traction online, and we don't want to lose that traction. And so we still want to serve
Absolutely.
our online audience. It has really kept us afloat and kept our church connected. And so it's caused us to really expand our media ministry. And I would suggest that if you're a church working without a media ministry, you're not going to make it. I don't care if you're a storefront or a mega church. If you
Right.
don't have enough wisdom and insight to know that you should be streaming, I doubt very seriously that you're going to make it. And I think presentation, if I could say this, Bishop, if you allow me some
Sure.
latitude,
Sure.
presentation is so important. I'll be honest with you. I've watched some churches online that I wouldn't go to. You're out in the parking lot yelling and screaming, and the camera is on somebody's phone, and then that's okay if you got the right gimbals and stuff to make that look presentable, and you got 10 different people coming and praying. And so it's like, how many prayers are we going to pray? And they're not praying anything of revelation. They're just shouting and screaming and yelling and screaming. And then the preacher comes and there's nothing inspirational. There's nothing revelatory. Outside an old raggedy building in an old raggedy parking lot. I mean,
So are you of the belief that what you're well, let me say this, what you're describing sounds very chaotic.
Yeah. I I would agree.
Now, for me, Apostle, I can't do the parking lot thing. I don't. I think my style of ministry, I think it would distract me if they're blowing horns at me. I don't know. Maybe I could do it at a church that I know the people, but I couldn't be a guest preacher at a church where where they had the parking lot thing. I mean, it works. I've seen people do it in excellence. I mean, I've seen them do it in great excellence. I mean, it's orderly. The people are compliant, but then you have some, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've
And then
seen it
there's that.
work both ways, but I think it really all goes back to leadership. And I'll be honest with you, I think in this season, the current climate, people need to be hearing from their leader. Now, granted, I've been preaching every day, and I've brought in a couple of trusted voices, but I've really minimized that. During this time, you need to hear from your leader, your pastor, and the pastor or that leader, apostle, bishop, prophet, whoever you are. You need to be hearing from God. There needs to be something. This is not the time for the church to be silent. This is not the time for the church to become stagnant, but this is the time for the church to be. One second, it's my wife. I'm live, sweetheart.
And look, we family, so hey.
Yeah. And so this is a time for the church to be engaging. And what's starting to happen is, see, in the pandemic, the celebrity preacher won't make it if he ain't got nothing to say. Because see that you don't need 20 armor bearers to usher you to the platform. You don't need anybody to grab you no water. See, this water, I'm getting my own water right here. Now, granted, some of our production staff, when I'm on, they'll bring me water. But this is the time where you legitimately have to serve, and we need to do so in excellence. We need to do so in excellence. Even with the studio setup here, I was on live one day, and one preacher said, "I think he's trying to fool us with the backdrop." I said, "I think I'm doing production." I think that's called production value, sir.
Right.
It's production value, and for my presentation, for my church, we want to produce a great product that our church can be proud of. I'm speaking to people globally around the world on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, and so aesthetics do say something about who you are. And I just thought to myself,
Right.
I said, man, he's missed that thought. He's totally missed it, because here is the thing.
Yeah.
I'm not okay. I'm not logging on to hear. Well, I'll leave it alone.
No, don't leave it alone, Apostle. Come on now. You on the prophet's porch.
I'm not gonna log on to hear you preach from the side of your bed. Not gonna.
Well, listen. Where I'm sitting right now, I'm sitting at my dining room table. And what? Well, look, listen.
But you have nice aesthetics. You have nice aesthetics.
Critique me. Tell me, does this look? Do I look all right? I mean, I'm just saying.
You have very nice aesthetics. I need a haircut. My barber will be. I'll be there on the way. But you got nice aesthetics. It's engaging. It's appropriate.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? But if you got your dog in the background, the puppy jumping on the bed, come on, man. We got to do better than that.
Yeah, it's so forth.
I don't have a backdrop. When you look at this, is a picture of a room, and we imposed it for a green screen. So the individual just didn't know, and that's okay. But aesthetics are extremely important, because aesthetics speaks to excellence. When you look at my presentation, you don't have to wonder if you come to my church if it's going to be clean.
Right.
When you look at my aesthetics, you don't have to wonder if you come to my church if your microphone's going to work. When you look at my presentation, it says something about who I am, and I believe in being operating with a more excellent spirit. Just because you got a storefront don't mean it needs to be raggedy, and I'll leave that alone.
Absolutely, I believe that. I believe that. I believe that wholeheartedly. You don't have to listen. You don't have storefront don't mean raggedy, and you have to look. This pandemic is a game changer. Going back. We have to reassess. It's a game changer. It's a game changer for our lives, for our ministries, and for everything that's attached to us. I mean, we either going to produce or we gonna go somewhere and sit down. That's the choice we got to make. Either produce what the Lord is requiring or sit down.
Say that again. If you're not producing in this season, you won't make it. And unfortunately, and I've been declaring this for the last 3 months, I believe the pandemic is being used to push some people out. There's some churches that need to close.
Yeah.
And as a man of God, I don't take pleasure in saying that, but as an apostolic leader, I do take pleasure in saying there's some people who should have never opened. There's some people who've outstayed their welcome. There's certain people who miss their moments, and it's time to move on. And, when you think about it, especially for the African-American church, as an institution, the African-American or the Black church, however you want to call them. I know people say we shouldn't say Black church, white church. And, I won't debate that with you. The bottom line is when you go to the hood, you got churches filled with Black people. And when you go to the other side of the tracks, you got churches filled with white people. And so depending on your demographic, Reset Church, we're more of a mixed culture, but I'm a Black leader. I make no qualms about that. We have to ascend to a level of reassessing if what we're doing is effective. And I've said this to my leadership, we have to have metrics in place whereby we're able to examine our level of efficacy. I think it's a sad thing when a pastor can't tell you what his attrition rate is. But I've talked to pastors who didn't even know what attrition rate was. But if you
Right.
don't know what your attrition rate is, if you don't know your brand, your church culture, what's the culture of your church? What's your ministry brand? What's your specific assignment to the body of Christ? What is your specific assignment? What are you been tasked to do? And when people say, well, preach the gospel and get people saved, I'm sorry, sir, that is not your specific assignment. That's the assignment of the entire body. Why does your voice
Right.
exist? Why does your church exist? Why does your church need to exist? If you need a church to pay your bills, you're in the wrong business. You follow me?
Say it again, Apostle.
You know, if you need a church to pay your rent, then you're in the wrong business. Now, that doesn't mean that the church should not take care of the man or woman of God adequately. I'm not suggesting that, because we both know scripturally that's not true. But if your sole reason for being in ministry is because you need someone to pay your bills, then the pandemic is going to push you out. Not only that, if you're only in ministry simply because they wouldn't let you be in charge anywhere else, and you went and got you a building, put you a 10 name sign on the church, and now you're the bishop of what and who we don't know, but you're the bishop now. This pandemic might expose that you might not be the leader that you need to be. And what I'm suggesting is this: there are a lot of great ministries out and a lot of great voices that are undeveloped, and yet they want to be dominant. But I want to express to them, the brighter the light, the hotter the heat.
Absolutely. Oh my God.
The brighter the light, the hotter the heat. And if you have not been developed, you will have a meltdown under the light. And there's no crumble like a public crumbling.
Well, listen, but watch this. Under the light, you either going to be a closer or a poser. You're going to close the vision, do it the way the Lord told you to do in this pandemic, or you just going to be posing and not producing any work.
Yeah.
Either or.
And I think the pandemic is exposing thought processes.
Yes.
Because, it's, should I say that? I don't know if
yes, you should say it, Apostle. You should say it.
I'm having conversations with some people who are leaders, who are pastoring people who are not shepherding, don't understand the concept of shepherding, don't understand the concept of fishing, and quite frankly, don't understand the concept of much.
Oh my. And
they're taking revelation that they've gotten from someone else that they're not equipped to deliver. And it's like the old folks would say, your slip is showing. Now, I know some folk won't get that, but my grandmother used to say, your slip is showing. And I would be like, Mother, I don't wear slips. She said, baby, your slip is showing. And that simply means that you're being exposed. See, there's nothing like exposure without preparation. And what I'm beginning to see, and I've seen this for quite some time, but you see it now more so because we're virtual. You're starting to see people want to make a proclamation without preparation.
Yeah. Because it's easy to launch a ministry or launch a presence, virtually with no preparation. You just go online and start running your mouth.
Yeah, with nothing to say. I told one of my sons in the gospel a couple of weeks ago, I said, son, I want you to hear my heart on this. It is better to be thought of as a fool than to go live on Facebook and remove all doubt.
Right. Right. Exactly. I am one of those people that I struggled with the Facebook Live thing. It just wasn't me. I can preach in front of people live all the time. I mean, I've been doing it for so many years, but going on Facebook Live was just such a fear for me. And now, I'm able to flow in this, on this platform, with the same confidence that I'm able to do live, because of people that the Lord has assigned to my life that are pushing me, that are praying for me, and so forth. And so this is definitely, I'm doing a live on Sunday mornings, and I've had inbox messages asking me, are you starting a church, and so forth. I said, look, I don't know what it is. I'm just obeying God at this point. I don't know what it is.
Well, I think people need to get beyond the mindset of if I'm called to a ministry assignment, then that means start a church.
Right.
What if you're anointed for a more global spirit? I never forget I planted a church in a particular city. The church began to explode with growth, and all of the nuances that came with, all of the nuances that came.
Right.
All right. They had to all the nuances that came with, and the Lord spoke to me. He said, "You're sitting here fighting for a city, and I'm trying to send you to nations. Stop it."
Right.
And it's something, very different when God will rebuke you, because at the end of the day, that rebuke could come to bless you. Not every rebuke is to harm you. I don't think any rebuke, if received properly, is to harm you. But that rebuke can come to a place where it's God really redirecting your efforts. And so, as our efforts are being redirected, it's important to note of what God has called me to, what God is saying to me in this moment. And every ministry does not necessarily need a church, if you would. Whatever happened to the global evangelist? Whatever happened to the itinerant preacher? Especially if your ministry is very prophetic in nature, you can't prophesy to the same people every Sunday, or at least you shouldn't, because as you grow with them, there's not much to prophesy, because you get to know them and you know all of their business. And so I think in this season, we're going to have to be more expansive in our thought process. We're going to have to be more expansive in our approach, and we're going to have to begin to research and reassess the tools that we use, and begin to tool ourselves, equip ourselves in a different capacity, so that we can reach a broader audience. I am all for revelation. I am all for a prophetic flow. I'm all for that, but I'm also equally an advocate for intelligence and a very intellectual presentation and persuasion of theology that will impact people's psychology. Because if your psychology is not impacted by your theology, then you need to do something different, because what you believe should change how you think, and what you believe should govern how you perform. And so as we move forward, I think what's beginning to happen is people are looking for a more authentic presentation, and something that's a bit more impactful. And so going forward, I think ministry is going to be more results driven, because the church is the only place where people can go and not produce results, and we can just call it God. But anything that's healthy grows.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that your church has to grow into a mega church, because I don't believe every church needs to be a mega church, and I don't believe every mega church God is with. There's some things that are mega and they're just infected. But yeah, infection grows or can produce size, I would say. Not necessarily growth, but it produces
Right.
size. But what's growing, it's toxic. And so I think in this current climate, it's a beautiful time, and allowing, and who's believing, and who's being consistent. Keep going, keep pushing, because in this season, God approve you. You have the honor of pastoring in a global pandemic, and you're making history as we speak. This is something that the world has never seen. And this is one of the first times that the world is running to the church looking for answers like never before. And we're outside. Most of us are outside of our church building. So it's a beautiful time. And you have to expand your thinking so to the point that when everyone else is running away from opposition, we turn and run toward it.
Absolutely.
We run toward the opposition. We are the solution. We are the answer. We have the answer, in Jesus, we have the answer. And so I think in this, and I pray that your audience hears my heart. It's time now to become more intelligent in our presentation.
Right.
It's time now to represent God well.
Yeah. Represent God well. And Apostle, I think that a mistake, and I'll be honest, I made this mistake being new and gifted in ministry years ago. I've been in ministry for about 25 years now. I would substitute. I thought because I was so gifted that I didn't have to study.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would flow from my gift, even manage my relationships through my gift. And so when you manage relationships through your gift, then it's going to be your gift that has to keep and maintain the relationship, because they never really get to know who you are.
Well, here's the thing: if I build a relationship with you, and I am going to expose me to you and allow you to get to know me, and then you use your gift to just navigate that, then you rob me of an opportunity to know you. And if you manage your relationships with your gift, they will ultimately fail because your gift was never meant to manage relationships. You'd be surprised all the brothers who are gifted and their marriages are horrible.
Oh my.
They're so gifted that the church loves them and their wives are hurting and they don't feel any need to repair the breaches with their wives and some sisters in ministry. They preaching the gospel and they're prophesying all over the place. I'm prophet is this, and your husband is at home, hungry, alone, abandoned, sexually deprived, but you're anointed. Your gift is making room, and your first ministry. And I think we need to stress this.
That's good.
And I can't stress this enough. Your first ministry, man of God, woman of God, your first ministry, man of God, is to your missus. The Lord spoke to me years ago. He said, I will not permit you to minister to the masses and you not minister to the missus. Your first ministry is your marriage.
I learned the hard way, Apostle. I learned the hard way. The
good part is that you learned.
Yeah. I learned the hard way, and I'm still learning. You know, I am still learning. I'm not ashamed of that. I'm still learning. Iris Kinney, she is still learning me. And so, you know, marriage is work, and marriage and ministry is work.
You know what I found? That the joy of marriage is the process of watching your spouse evolve. Like whenever I'm doing marriage mentoring, I don't call it marriage counseling. I call it marriage mentoring. And people say she changed. And I thought she was supposed to change. He was supposed to change. The key becomes, can you appreciate the change enough to vacillate, change, and compliment it? I'm not the same person, I am today that I was at 22. Right. I shouldn't be the same person. Of course I change. Life will change me. Exposure will change me. Exposure expands my expectation. The more that I'm exposed to, the more.
Repeat that, Apostle. Unpack that for me. Unpack that exposure.
Exposure expands your expectation. Case in point. When I've been exposed to more, I have a greater expectation for more. And that's why denominations can be very scary, because you may be the man, you may be the celebrity preacher in your denomination. And when you go outside of your denomination, because you were only trained in your denomination and you've never had to preach a global theology, you can't even relate to a different audience. You'll say that they didn't get with you, when the truth of the matter is, in your denomination, they embellished you. You really didn't have much to say, but you grew up in our denomination, so we shout. And then you walk into a different demographic that doesn't, that you can't shout them. You have to be able to teach them the mechanics of faith, and you got to be able to teach them the oracles of Christianity. And when you can't produce that, it's because you have very limited exposure. And the danger in what we're seeing in church now, that I believe God is cleaning out when he says he's purifying the platform, is we've had a lot of people with neighborhood experience attempt to be a voice on global matters.
Right.
And so if your experience is limited, then the spear of your reach and the potency of your voice is not as great, because you don't have much exposure. You know, it's like, if you could only preach to black people and not white people, then are you really a solid preacher? If you can only preach to white people and not black people, then
are you really as grace to the nations as you say you are?
Absolutely. You hear people talk all the time, I'm going to the nations, but you've not studied culture. You don't understand cultural trends. You're going to go to a culture and tell them that holiness is not wearing makeup, or not wearing lipstick, or not wearing pants. And in certain cultures, they have no idea what you're talking about, because one, that's not the gospel. That's something somebody in church taught you. But if what you preach in your church cannot work globally, that's not the gospel. Right. The scripture is very clear. For God so loved the world. The gospel should impact the world. And so you have people who are called to nations and can't even capture their neighborhood.
My. And people calling them, well, I ain't going to get on it. I've never understood how someone can call their ministry international and they've never been international.
Well, I don't see how you can call your ministry international and you're not in covenant with people abroad and you don't even have a passport. When you talk about an international ministry, you're talking about something with a global reach. I have preached all across the globe, and yet the name of my church doesn't have international in it. Why? Because I'm a firm believer that marketing and branding, now some church folks are going to really get uncomfortable when I say this. Because here's the thing. If your church is Zion Temple, Apostolic, Intercession, Powerhouse, God didn't give you that name. God didn't give you that name.
Apostle.
No, 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 no. God didn't. God wouldn't give you a name that's going to confuse your audience. The Bible says that he's not the author of confusion. God did not give you that name. You
Oh
wanted a
my.
way to make your church sound very powerful and very prolific. And you decided that more was more as opposed to less being more. And so branding and marketing, especially for the Black church, we got to get beyond, the Lord told me that it was going to be an apostolic, an intercession, a free flowing. But did he tell you to put all of that in the name? Or should that be the atmosphere of your ministry, the culture of your ministry, the pillars of your ministry? You follow me? And
Right.
so marketing may not be your strong suit, ministry may. So you need to partner with someone who markets, which helps me shape that international thing. Maybe you don't go all over the globe, but maybe you formed alliances and relationships and you bring global people
Bring
in so that
people in.
your
Right.
people are exposed to greater.
Exactly. And let's take a step further.
Uh-oh.
When I look at the name of Reset Church,
Mm-hmm.
I see that when you execute the ministry the way you execute, it is a resetting word. It is a word that's going to reset. It is producing the name that you have stamped on, that God has stamped on this ministry.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Now, with regard to the Activation Center, that is the umbrella by which all of my ministries are under.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord said to me that, that is going to be my primary thrust,
And see,
activation.
that makes sense. So when you say activation center, I know that that is a place of impartation. I know that that's a place of development. I know that's a place that maybe that for some, it could be a place of pruning, but ultimately it's a place to develop, deliver,
Mm-hmm.
and deploy you. You've come here to be
Absolutely.
activated. You're not here to stay for the rest of your life. I want to activate you. I want to get you delivered. I want to develop you. And my entire goal is to deploy you,
Absolutely.
to make you, help you be more fruitful in your approach to whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that's the key, and I know some people will, are offended at the notion. He can't tell me God didn't tell me to name my church that. Okay, well, let me ask you a question. Why would God give you something that would not be fruitful? See,
Right.
we have to examine a lot of stuff that we call God. Anything God gave you should produce fruit.
Absolutely. It should produce fruit, and it should produce people that are bearing fruit.
Absolutely. And that's that we talk about reassessing, but we need to also talk about reproduction.
Oh my. Work right there for a minute.
We need to talk about reproduction. Is my ministry impregnating anyone whereby their babies look like they came out of a house of stability?
Look, do they have my DNA?
Do they have my spiritual DNA? Is
Yeah.
it reproducing after its own kind? And is it producing something greater from which it came? It kills me, the brothers starting all of these fellowships and they're apostles and bishops over these fellowships, but they're not equipping the people. They just want the check at convocation. And it amazes me, the people who submit to these organizations and submit to leadership that does not speak into you, that does not impart. And the only thing you get to do is get a collar and show up for convocation. And you need to bring that offering now. All the bishops need to bring this and elders need to bring this. But what am I getting when I'm connected to you? When
you forgot about the lapel pin.
Well, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. You get the lapel pin. And so I've been in the fellowship 10 years and I get a pin that says that, I've been in 10 years. But has my ministry seen anything relative to the tree that I'm connected to?
Yeah, I mean, we really have to look at that. What have you benefited? And that's not a benefit is not a bad word. You need your life and your ministry should have benefited. And guess what? I'm gonna tell you, we often sometimes as men, when we join fellowships and we put our ministry under fellowships, we need to be making sure that our spouses are getting what they need too.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer. If God has connected us, the relationship is one symbiotic. I bring something to the table and I also eat from the table. Now, If the two have become one, if I'm eating and my spouse is starving, we're out of, here we have a problem. Because again, my first ministry is to my marriage. My first ministry is the sanctity, productivity, covering, security, provision to my wife. That's my first ministry. Everything comes after that.
Yeah.
Everything comes after that. Now, I learned that very early on in my ministry after just making some very grave mistakes. But the key becomes, if you're connected to a tree that does not produce fruit and you stay, then I don't blame the tree. Eventually, you need to disconnect. And I agree with you. If you're eating and your wife is not, then I'm gonna just say it, you're less than a man. Because why would you go somewhere you get fed and let your wife starve?
Yeah. And that is, and if your wife is starving, that is going to threaten the peace and partnership of your marriage.
Well, unfortunately, guys who do that, they don't care. There's no peace and partnership to begin with, because if we're in partnership, when I come, you realize that my wife is with me. She's equally as valuable. And I tell my church, you don't get the me that you get without the she that she is.
Wow, that's good. Say that again, Apostle.
You don't get the me that you get without the she that she is.
Wow, that's really good.
And that's extremely important. And I think moving forward, we have to represent family. It was never the will of God for you to have ministry tear your family apart.
Yeah.
How is it that you birthed out sons and daughters in ministry and your own sons despise you?
Yeah. Oh my God. And that's so prevalent. And I tell you, I'll be honest, I made a lot of mistakes with my son, as it relates to when he was coming up, not going to his games and so forth, because I'm on the road preaching and, just missing very important moments and so forth. I made a lot of mistakes. Oh my gosh, Apostle, I made a lot of mistakes, and then, fortunately, being in a blended family, Pastor Iris got the revelation. There were a couple of times she said, well, guess what? I'm not going with you. I'm going to support, our son in his, in his endeavors and so forth.
Yeah.
And you would have think a light bulb would have went off in my head, but the light bulb didn't go off yet.
Well, here's the thing that I think that we weren't taught, but I now echo. Church is not my life.
Yeah.
Church is not my life. My church is not the sum total of my life. I don't want my children to feel like they need to become a slave to church. Church is not my life. I am an officer of the church.
Right.
Church is a prominent part of my life. My ministry assignment to the body of Christ and the kingdom. But here's the thing. I'm not going to miss the abundant life helping everybody else get it.
Come on.
Church is not my life.
And I want you to share a little bit about what the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about preachers' kids and them not being PKs.
Yeah, well, my children are not preachers' kids; they're my kids.
Right. I like that.
When people say I'm a PK, my children have never said that. They've never uttered that, because you're not your pastor's kids. I'm your father. My first responsibility is to you. I'm your father. You are not a preacher's kid. You are my child. You're my kid. You're not defined by my vocation, and our relationship is not defined by our vocation. You don't go and go say, oh, he's a doctor's kid. He's an engineer's kid. No, right. That's my child, and he happens to be an engineer. And so I wanted to really get that right. The one thing that I'm extremely proud of, and the thing that I'm the most proud of in my life, is my ability to really have been a balanced father. I'm not saying I got everything in life right, but I've really worked very hard to get that right. I wanted my children not to hate church. And in the very early days of my ministry, I was out of balance, and my daughter stormed out of a meeting. And at the time, she wasn't even 10. I think she was about 8. And, wow. I could tell she was upset. And so I was meeting with my leadership, and I saw her storm out, and that just wasn't like her. So I knew she was fed up. And so I went up stairs, and I said, hey, is everything okay? And she said, can I say what I want to say without getting in trouble? I said, sweetie, you're my daughter. Say whatever you like to say. She said, I could say whatever I want to say without getting in trouble. I said, yeah. She said, I know ministry comes first. I know everything is ministry, but we didn't want, you never asked us if we wanted to move into this place, leave our friends and this, that, and the other. I said, sweetie, so you think ministry is more important to me than you? She said, well, Daddy, yes. I took a 4-year break from ministry.
Yeah.
I watched my children grow up. I spend time with my kids. I watched my son play football, my daughter play volleyball, my daughter play basketball. I really took a very hands-on approach. I started a company, and I was really looking for a place to hide because I grew up an orphan, a foster child, and I was just determined that if God had called me to ministry, he gave me a beautiful family. God knows what family means to me. And so I took 4 years off, and my daughter came to me one day. We were outside in my driveway. She said, I think it's time for you to go and pastor again. And at the time she was 14. I said, you think so?
Wow.
She said, we know you love us. She's 13 or 14, somewhere in there. We know you love us. We know we come first. She said, but Daddy, I believe it's time for you to get back to it. And, I said, your brother feel the same way? She said, yeah, we talked about it. And we decided that it's time for you to go be you. Go do what you do. We're secure. You've made us feel like we matter. And I thought, okay. And that was important because I don't believe it was the will of God for me to be Big Daddy Prophet, Big Daddy Apostle, and my daughter be somewhere laid up in some strange bed, not knowing who she was because she's a PK. My children are not preachers' kids; they're my kids. Because when they're PKs, that sends a notion that puts them under a microscope where the church can judge how good they are.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely have made that mistake. In excusing and justifying some behaviors, and using that stereotype as a PK. And as we have a comment in the comment section, Minister Ernest Johnson said fatherhood is very important. Sons need their father, children need their father, but in this climate, sons need their father. And just a little bit about Minister Johnson. He is an advocate for fathers in the North Carolina area. He does a lot of work, supporting fatherhood initiatives and so forth. And so he definitely is a voice as it relates to that, because sometimes, and sometimes, and even in the court system and family court, Apostle, fathers are done really wrong sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I tell every father, if you can, stay out of court, which means if you want to stay out of court as a father, you need to know which bed you need to stay out of.
Yeah. Hey, come on here.
No, because we have to own that, because people nowadays don't want to own the fact that if your baby mama's crazy, you chose her. If your baby father's a deadbeat, you chose him. There was something in you that you chose. And then there legitimately sometimes when relationships just don't work out. But now if you got 3 different baby mamas, the issue is you, sir. It's just you. The issue is you. You don't understand the value of your seed. And you don't understand the power of sonship, because if you understood the value of your seed, you wouldn't just waste it anywhere. And if you understood the value and the power of sonship, you would realize that your son needs to be mentored and raised in your palace.
And just to make sure that I'm understanding you correctly, you said the value of your seed and wasted it everywhere. That means sleeping around, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the quality of our lives will be based gravely on the quality of our choices.
That's good.
And maturity is when we accept full accountability for choices.
Right.
You follow me?
Right.
Fatherhood is important. My son, of course, works on our production team. He's part of the production team, but I keep him close because I want him to see one. Now, I want you to catch this. He needs to know daddy works. He needs to know that daddy is disciplined. He needs to know that daddy is focused. He needs to know that daddy is called, but bigger than that, he needs to know that daddy wants him with me, that he is wanted. He is loved. I want you here with me, son. And, the other morning we got off air from our broadcast, and he was getting ready to go to bed. I said, you want to go grab some breakfast, just you and I? And his face lit up like a light bulb, man. I mean, his face lit up because, my son, he's a guy, of few words. Well, at least with me, he's a guy, of few words. When I hear him talk to his friends, I mean, they loud and crazy. But his face just totally lit up.
Right.
And, I purposed in my heart that I would do that. You get it? That I would make sure that I would take moments and spend time with him. And that touched me in such a special way. Now, the whole time we ride, he probably said 5 words.
Right.
But I knew he was glad we were together. And so we got back here to the house. I took him to the place he wanted for breakfast. We brought it back to the house. And I could just tell that he felt like, I'm my dad's son. That's my daddy. And that's important. That's really important.
Absolutely. Wow, this has been such a great discussion, Apostle. I know that you have an appointment to go to in a few minutes, and I too have an appointment that I need to go to handle some business and so forth. But I have so enjoyed this conversation. We didn't get to everything I wanted to get to, but certainly we will plan a part 2 and so forth, and just to follow up on this discussion. Thank you all so much, my audience, for your comments, very important comments. God bless you all. Thank you for my brothers and sisters from the Reset Church in Dallas, Texas, that are supporting on today. Do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make, Apostle?
Yeah, I just want to encourage every co-laborer in ministry. This too will come to pass. Your vision doesn't have to die. God won't betray you. I know it's difficult. I know it's tough to some degree, but I want you to be encouraged. Your ministry is still valid. You're still valuable. The whole world is dealing with tough times. And so tough times come, but you're built for this. You've been built to overcome this. And so I speak shalom over your life, grace and peace over your life. I'm in agreement with you for heaven's best regarding your family, your finances, your faith walk, your ministry. And I just want you to be encouraged. We're all on the same team. We're all representing Christ in the earth, and all of us have some challenges, but the days that lie ahead are going to be some tremendous days. The days that we have to look forward to are going to be days where we have plenty, are going to be days where we will begin to see supernatural growth in ourselves, in our homes, in our churches. And so I pray for your marriages. I'm praying for your family, your children, praying for your ministries. Keep your head up. Don't allow the world to make you feel like your voice is not relevant because you may be sidelined for a season. Because the beauty of being sidelined is that you get to see the field from a different vantage point. When you're on the sideline, you can see the entire field. You can see the players. You can see their strengths. You can see their weaknesses. Use this time to prepare, to pray, to plan, to be prosperous in your next season. Don't become dismayed. Don't lose hope. Don't become discouraged. Don't allow the devil to convince you that it's over. It's not over. If God wants you in the game, you're in the game, sir. You're in the game, man. And so in this season, begin to write out your vision for the next season, begin to plan for the next season, and watch God bless it.
God bless you. And thank you so much, Apostle Williams. You are certainly a wealth of knowledge, a reservoir of wisdom. And I have so much love and respect for your ministry. I have great respect for you, man of God, because, it's not just your gift, but you're just a solid dude. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that so much, more than you'll ever know. In a time, I'm one of those people, and Pastor Iris, well, you know this, I'm very guarded.
Give my best, Lady Iris.
I will. I definitely would do that. I'm very guarded, and I don't let everybody in the way that I let you in.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know that to be true.
Yes,
and I feel the same way. And you and I've talked about this, and I know we got to go. I'm very careful who I connect with.
Yes, sir. Yes,
because
sir.
I'm at a place in my life, Bishop, and you know this. I'm saying it for the audience. You already know it.
Right.
If I'm going to connect with you, we're going to have some purpose connected to this. I don't have time to be chewing. I don't have time to be cutting the fat or doing whatever they call it. I don't have that kind of time. If we're going to be aligned together, it's going to need to be on purpose. And the reason I connect with people like yourself is because you push me. See, people don't want to be pushed anymore.
Amen.
You put pressure in a good way to say, hey, I have an expectation for you to produce. That's all you said to me in that moment. You gave me some compliments, but essentially you're saying, and I expect that same level of productivity.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Look, feeders can't be fed by everybody.
Man, say that again, please. Unpack that real briefly. Just explain that.
Feeders can be fed by everybody. You and I feed people all the time, leaders, laity, on a great scale, on a scale that we will never publish. People that we talk to with names and notoriety, and so because we feed people, we cannot be fed by everyone. Not saying that we're so great and grand, but it's just a matter of fact.
This is true. And if I could say one thing that I want to leave, and I just felt impressed with the Holy Spirit to say this, because somebody listening needs to hear this. Giraffes don't bend over to talk to rats.
I just had a visual.
we don't see on the same plane. We don't see on the same level. You know,
Absolutely.
Even eagles, if you're an eagle, we made in the sky.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so if you're an eagle and you find yourself being separated, don't feel bad. The air up here is thin. Buzzards can't breathe up here.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm going to leave that alone.
And then there's that, because we will go into another leg of this. Apostle Williams, you and I will connect later offline. I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing all that you've shared. You are a permanent guest on the Prophet's Porch. Yeah, you can come back anytime you want to.
I am honored. And big shout out to, I think I saw Joy Yvette from Reset. Big shout out to Reset. Thank you guys so much for supporting Pastor, supporting Bishop. You know, yes. I love the church. They'll follow me wherever I go, and I just hope to lead them in a good place. So big shout out to those guys. Thank you so much, Bishop, for having me. Like I don't take it lightly. I know people, I put it this way. I know some folks you could have sitting in this seat.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I know who could sit to what is this, the left side or right side of your screen? I know. So I'm honored. I appreciate it more than you know. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank your audience for putting up and listening to me. But I really appreciate you for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. And if by chance, if you would like to sow into Apostle Williams, his Cash App is $RW Collection. Collections. If you want to sow into
no S.
Collection, $RW Collection. If you want to sow into him, please feel free to sow into him. He's shared some great information, great wisdom, and so forth. Great ministry. If you'd like to sow into me or the Prophet's Porch, you can do so at Avery Kinney. God bless you all, and you all have an amazing day. And thank you for tuning in to the Prophet's Porch. God bless you all.
Hallelujah.